help me reach 1,000 subscribers. Please like the video and share your thoughts on the video. Your feedback helps make the contents better. Now let's get to the story.
The moment I walked through the front door, I already knew something was wrong. Not because I heard shouting, though that came soon enough, but because of the way the house felt. You know that feeling when the air in a room changes the second you step into it? Like something heavy is just hanging there, waiting to drop on your head? Yeah, that. Brenda was standing in the middle of the living room with her arms folded so tight across her chest, I genuinely thought she might snap her own ribs. Her son Kyle was right beside her, leaning against the wall like he was trying to look casual, but his jaw was doing that thing where it keeps moving even though no words are coming out yet. They were both staring at me like I had just walked in wearing a clown suit and carrying a bucket of gasoline. "What did you do?" Brenda's voice hit me before I even had both feet inside. I set my keys down on the little table by the door. Slowly, calmly. The way a man does when he has been waiting for this exact moment and he is completely, 100% ready for it. I almost fainted at the ATM. "Daniel," she screamed. "The card was declined. Everything is gone. What did you do?" Kyle pushed off the wall. "You need to explain yourself, man. Right now." I looked at him. Then I looked at her. And then I did something that clearly neither of them expected. I smiled. Not a big smile. Not a mean one either. Just the quiet kind. The kind that a man wears when he finally stops being the one getting played. "Sit down," I said. "Both of you. We need to talk." The silence that followed was so thick you could have cut it with one of Brenda's fancy kitchen knives that I bought and she never let me use. But before I tell you how that conversation went, and trust me, you are going to want to hear every single word of it, let me back up. Because none of this makes sense unless you understand who I am and how I got to that doorstep in the first place. My name is Daniel. I am 43 years old. I work as a logistics coordinator for a mid-sized freight company just outside of Columbus, Ohio. I have been at that job for 11 years. I'm not rich. I'm not glamorous. I drive a 2017 Toyota Camry that has a crack in the dashboard that I keep meaning to fix and never do. I like football, specifically the Bengals, which if you know anything about being a Bengals fan you already understand that I am a man who has spent a great deal of his life learning how to deal with disappointment. I bring that up because it feels relevant. I'm also, as of 18 months ago, a husband. For the second time. My first marriage ended 10 years before all of this. My ex-wife, Patricia, and I split up on decent terms. No kids together. We just grew apart the way some people do, slow and quiet like a sweater coming unraveled one thread at a time. We are actually still friendly, which I mention not to brag but because it becomes important later. We talk maybe once a month. She moved to Denver. She is doing well. I genuinely wish her nothing but good things. After Patricia, I spent about 8 years on my own. I dated here and there. Nothing serious. I bought a small house in a quiet neighborhood. I paid off most of my debt. I built up a decent savings account. Not impressive by Wall Street standards but by Daniel from Columbus standards it was a genuinely proud accomplishment. We're talking around $62,000 saved up over years of brown bag lunches and skipping the fancy coffee places. That money represented 11 years of discipline and sacrifice and saying no to myself over and over again. And then I met Brenda. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these stories matter. Just hit that subscribe button right now. It takes 2 seconds and it means everything. Brenda came into my life at a work function. Not my work. She was there with someone else, a mutual acquaintance named Greg who brought her along to our company's annual cookout. She was 40, bright smile, sharp sense of humor, looked great in a sundress. We talked for 2 hours about nothing important and everything felt easy. She made me laugh 3 times in the first 10 minutes, which for me personally is a very high bar because I am not someone who laughs easily. She told me she was divorced. Told me she had a son from her previous marriage, Kyle, who was 22 at the time. She told me Kyle was working on finding himself, which I now understand is the polite way of saying he was living on her couch playing video games at 22 years old and had no plans to change that situation. I didn't judge. I have no kids of my own. Who am I to say how someone else raises theirs? We dated for about a year. Things moved fast, maybe faster than they should have. She was warm and funny and attentive in those early months. She cooked dinner twice a week. She asked about my day and actually seemed to listen. She came to a Bengals game with me and didn't complain once, not even when we lost by 17 points in the fourth quarter, which speaks either to incredible character or the fact that she genuinely did not understand what was happening on the field. I chose to see it as the former. I proposed after 14 months. She said yes before I even finished the sentence. Looking back, I probably should have thought harder about that. We got married in a small ceremony. 30 people. Nice restaurant in the Short North neighborhood. It cost me about $9,000, which I paid for almost entirely myself because Brenda said she was a little tight right now, but that things would even out once we were settled. I smiled and nodded and handed over my credit card because that's what you do when you love someone and you want them to be happy on your wedding day. Kyle, of course, was there. He wore a shirt that was only partially tucked in and spent most of the reception on his phone. He called me Daniel, which fine, I'm not his dad. He also ate 4 plates of food, which I noticed only because I was standing next to the buffet at one point and watched it happen in real time. We moved into my house. Brenda and Kyle. Because Kyle naturally came with a package. He was going to just stay for a few months, while he figured out his next move. That was 18 months ago. Here is where I have to be honest about something that I kept telling myself wasn't a big deal but was very much a big deal. About 3 months into the marriage, the financial dynamics started shifting in a way I couldn't ignore. Brenda had a part-time job at a doctor's office. She worked maybe 25 hours a week and brought home around $1,400 a month. Kyle didn't work at all. He had interviews lined up that perpetually never turned into anything. My salary after taxes came to about $5,200 a month. We had a joint account that I had added Brenda to when we got married, because that's what married couples do, right? Except I started noticing things. Little things at first. A charge at a restaurant I didn't go to. A withdrawal I didn't recognize. Some online purchases that weren't mine. When I asked Brenda about them, she had an explanation every time. This was Kyle's birthday dinner that she paid for. That was a household necessity. Those were just some things I needed. And every single time she said it in that firm but sweet voice she had, the kind that makes you feel like you'd be a jerk for pressing further, so I didn't. But the charges kept coming. Month after month. I started running the math late one night when I couldn't sleep and I nearly choked on my own breath. In 8 months of marriage, just under $11,000 had left our joint account in ways I couldn't fully account for. $11,000. On top of all the regular household bills I was already carrying, most of which Brenda contributed to only when it was convenient. I didn't confront her immediately. Instead, I started watching. Carefully. Quietly. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about being in a relationship with someone who is slowly draining you. They are very, very good at making you feel crazy for noticing. So before I opened my mouth, I needed to be sure. I started keeping a notebook. Old school. Paper and pen. Every charge I didn't recognize, I wrote it down with the date, the amount, and where it came from. Within 6 weeks, I had 2 full pages. Then something happened that changed everything. I got home from work one Thursday evening and Kyle was on the couch. Obviously, Kyle was always on the couch, but he was on the phone and he wasn't paying attention to the front door, and he was speaking just loud enough for me to catch pieces of his conversation as I walked through the hallway toward the kitchen. Yeah, the account's got about 60 in it right now, so... I stopped walking. Nah, he doesn't check it that close. Mom keeps him distracted. I stood completely still. Once he gets the inheritance from his uncle, we just gotta make sure we're still. I turned around and walked back out the front door. I sat in my Camry in the driveway for 45 minutes. My hands were shaking. Not from anger. Well, partly from anger, but mostly because my brain was working very fast and very hard and I needed it to slow down long enough for me to think clearly. Let me translate what I had just heard in case it wasn't obvious. Kyle was telling someone, on the phone casually in my house, about my bank balance. About the fact that his mother was keeping me distracted. And he mentioned an inheritance. Now here is where the story gets a little complicated because yes, there was an inheritance. My uncle Raymond, my father's brother, had passed away 4 months earlier. He had no children of his own. He left me his entire estate, which after the legal process finished up amounted to just under $220,000. It hadn't fully cleared yet. The money was sitting in a separate account that I had opened specifically for that purpose at a different bank, one that Brenda didn't know about and didn't have access to. I had mentioned the inheritance to Brenda, obviously. We were married. I wasn't trying to hide it. But I had told her the amount was still being sorted out by the lawyers, which was technically true and also conveniently vague. Kyle knew the number. $60,000? That was my main joint account balance at the time. And he knew it, which meant Brenda had told him. Which meant they were talking about my money together. Which meant this was not an accident or a misunderstanding or me being paranoid. This was deliberate. Now I want to pause here and ask you something. If you're watching this and you've ever been in a situation where someone you loved made you feel stupid for trusting them, drop a comment below. Just say, I've been there. Because sometimes the loneliest part isn't the betrayal itself. It's realizing you're not as alone in it as you thought. And if this story is hitting close to home for you, don't forget to subscribe. Every single subscriber tells me that these stories are worth telling. I did not go back inside that night and confront them. I called my buddy Terrence instead and told him I needed to crash at his place. I told Brenda I had an early work thing. She didn't question it. That alone told me something. Over the next 2 weeks I did 3 things. First, I called my uncle's estate attorney and had a conversation I probably should have had much earlier. I asked about how the inheritance would be treated in the event of a divorce. The attorney referred me to a family law specialist. I made an appointment. Second, I started moving money. Not in a dramatic or suspicious way. Just slowly, steadily redirecting my paycheck to a new account at a completely different bank. A bank Brenda had never heard me mention and had no connection to. I set it up online, got the new card mailed to my office, and began the transition quietly over about 10 days. Third, I called Patricia. Now this is the part 1 imagine some of you are going to find interesting. Patricia and I, as I mentioned, stayed on good terms after the divorce. What I did not mention is that Patricia, in the 10 years since we split up, had become a financial advisor. A pretty good one from what I understood. She had built a practice in Denver with a small team and a solid client list. We talked for about an hour. I told her what was going on. She didn't say, I told you so, even though she had, in fact, gently expressed some concerns about Brenda when I told her I was getting remarried. She just listened. And then she said, Daniel, what you need right now is documentation, separation of assets, and patience. In that order. She also said one other thing that I wrote down and taped to my bathroom mirror at work. She said, the best revenge is letting people finish their own plan. I didn't fully understand what she meant at the time. I do now. By the time I had everything set up the way I needed it, new account, paycheck redirected, the inheritance secured with legal protections that the family law attorney helped me put in place, I was ready. The old joint account still existed. Brenda still had access to it. But the balance had been drawn down to a small float, just enough to look normal on a surface glance. My real money was somewhere she couldn't touch. I didn't change anything about my behavior at home. I still came home for dinner. I still sat on the couch and watched whatever Brenda wanted to watch. I still said good morning to Kyle, who still responded with a grunt that I chose to interpret as affection. I was waiting. The thing about people who are running a slow con is that eventually they go for the big move. They can't help it. They've been patient and strategic, but greed has its own timeline and eventually it overrides everything else. The move came on a Wednesday morning. I was at work when I got an alert from the old joint account. Brenda had initiated a large transfer, the full remaining balance plus an overdraft attempt that the bank rejected. She had also apparently tried to wire something to an external account. I watched all of this in real time on my phone from my desk at work while eating a sandwich, which in retrospect is either the saddest or the most unbothered lunch break I have ever had. Probably both. I called my bank, confirmed I had already followed the security steps we'd arranged, and watched the attempted transfer get flagged and frozen. Then I went home. That was the moment I described at the beginning of this story. Brenda standing in the living room, arms folded like a disappointed teacher. Kyle by the wall trying to look intimidating in sweatpants. The house holding its breath. "What did you do?" she screamed. "I almost fainted at the ATM," she said. "The card was declined. Everything is gone." I set my keys down. I smiled. And then I said, "Sit down. Both of you. We need to talk." Neither of them sat down right away. Kyle did that thing where a 23-year-old man tries to puff out his chest and look larger than he is. Brenda's nostrils were doing something I had never seen them do before. I took my jacket off, hung it on the hook by the door, and walked past them both into the living room and sat in the armchair. The one that had always technically been my chair but that Kyle had claimed for himself about 6 weeks into living here. I was sitting in it now. I feel like that detail matters. "Sit," I said again. "Please." They sat. On the couch. Together. Like a team. Which, to be fair, they were. I looked at Brenda first. "How long have you been talking to Kyle about my bank account?" She opened her mouth. Closed it. "The specific balance," I said. "How long have you been telling him the specific number?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "I heard him, Brenda." I said it quietly. Not accusatory. Just factual. "About 3 weeks ago. He was on the phone in the living room and he said the account had about 60 in it. He said you were keeping me distracted. He mentioned the inheritance." The silence that came after that was different from the earlier silence. This one had a texture to it. You could feel both of them recalibrating. Kyle tried first. "You misheard." "Kyle," I said. "I genuinely have nothing against you as a person. But please don't do that right now. I'm talking to your mother." He shut up. I'll give him credit for that. Brenda tried a different approach. Her eyes got soft. She reached out toward me. "Daniel, baby, I can explain." "I know you can," I said. "And I want you to. But first I'm going to tell you what I know. And then you can fill in whatever you want." I told her everything. The charges I'd tracked. The notebook. The $11,000 over 8 months. The conversation I overheard. The fact that I'd spoken to an attorney. The fact that my paycheck had been going to a different account for 3 weeks. The fact that the old joint account, the one she had just tried to drain, had been intentionally kept low while I made arrangements. I told her about the new card. The new bank. The new account. I told her about Patricia. That one landed differently. Brenda's expression shifted in a way I hadn't anticipated. Her eyes narrowed. "You called your ex-wife?" "She's a financial advisor," I said. "And she's a good person. She helped me think clearly. She's been against us from the start." "She barely knows you," I said. She expressed some concern. Turns out she was right. I don't hold that against her. I hold the relevant parts against you. There's something deeply strange about having a conversation like that. You rehearse it in your head 100 times and you think you know how it will go. But real conversations don't follow scripts. Brenda started crying at a certain point. Real tears, I think, though by that stage of the relationship I had lost some of my ability to tell the difference. Kyle sat there looking at the floor. He had deflated considerably from his earlier posture. "What are you saying?" Brenda asked. "What does this mean?" "It means I've already spoken with an attorney about the process," I said. "I've protected the inheritance legally. It won't be considered a marital asset. The house is in my name and was owned prior to the marriage. You'll have 30 days to make other arrangements." You're divorcing me?" I looked at her for a long moment. "And here's the thing I want to be honest about, because I told you I'd write this like a real person and not like a robot. There was still a part of me that hurt. A real, genuine human part. Because I had loved her. Or I had loved who I thought she was. And there is a grief in that which doesn't go away just because you found out the truth. The truth doesn't cancel the feeling. It just clarifies it. But I also thought about that notebook. 2 full pages. $11,000. Kyle's voice saying Mom keeps him distracted. And I thought about my $62,000 of brown bag lunches and skipped coffee runs. And I thought about my Uncle Raymond, who worked his whole life and left that money to me specifically because he trusted me to build something real with it. "Yes," I said. "I am." Brenda cried harder. Kyle said something under his breath that I chose not to respond to. The next hour was not pleasant. I won't detail all of it because some of it I'm not proud of either. There were moments where I raised my voice, moments where I said things sharper than I needed to. Neither of us was entirely dignified. But by the end of it, both of them knew exactly where things stood. Now here is where I need to tell you about the plot twist. Because if you think this story ends there, you have underestimated the situation considerably. About a week after that conversation, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't pick up. I'm glad I did. The voice on the other end was a woman. She introduced herself as a person named Diane. She said she was calling because she had seen some activity on a shared account and traced it back to a name she recognized. Mine. She said she was Kyle's girlfriend. I asked her to repeat that. She said she had been with Kyle for about 8 months. She thought they were exclusive. She had recently found out that Kyle had been using the money he'd been receiving, and she used that word, receiving, which told me everything, to impress another woman. Dinners, trips, a weekend in Nashville. All on what he had access to through Brenda. She was not calling to yell at me. She was calling because she had screenshots. Bank transfers from Brenda to Kyle, labeled as rent and groceries. Screenshots of Kyle talking to the other woman. Screenshots of him discussing with that other woman how his mom's husband was loaded and it was only a matter of time. She asked me if I wanted copies. I said yes. Please. Send them to everything. She sent me 47 screenshots. 47. I sat at my kitchen table for about 30 minutes reading them. My initial feeling was something close to admiration, the way you might admire a very complicated machine you have just watched fall completely apart. They had been so committed to this. So organized. Kyle had apparently told his girlfriend that he was investing in real estate with money from a family business. He had described me as a silent business partner. The audacity of that is almost artistic. But here's what made it a genuine plot twist rather than just additional betrayal piled on top of existing betrayal. Among those 47 screenshots was a conversation between Kyle and Brenda, his mother, that was not about money at all. It was about me. Specifically, it was about a timeline. There was a message where Kyle said something to the effect of, if we can just get through the next 6 months, the inheritance will be fully settled and we move. That was the plan. Not a slow drain. Not indefinite financial leeching. There was an endpoint. A specific endpoint. They were going to wait until the inheritance money was fully accessible and then, based on what I was reading, Brenda was going to file for divorce herself. First. On her terms. With a claim to marital assets that would have been significantly larger if the inheritance had been mishandled. They weren't just spending my money. They were waiting to take all of it. And the only reason it failed, the only reason, was because of a crack in Kyle's operational security. One phone call, made in a room he thought was empty, overheard by a man who was supposed to be at work but had come home early because he wanted a quiet cup of coffee before the evening started. That is the actual story. A $62,000 savings account and a $220,000 inheritance. All nearly lost because Kyle couldn't be bothered to check whether his stepfather's car was in the driveway before making a phone call in the living room. I want to take a moment here before I finish, and I want to talk to anyone who's been in something like this. Not the exact scenario, everybody's situation is different, but that specific feeling of realizing that the person closest to you has been calculating. That the warmth was partly performance. That the life you thought you were building was being used as raw material for someone else's plan. If that's you, right now, in something, and if this story is something you felt in your chest while you were listening to it, please subscribe. Not just for me, but because you deserve to hear that you are not stupid. You are not weak. You just trusted someone who didn't deserve it. And that says something about you, not about them. The divorce proceedings were mercifully straightforward, given the circumstances. The attorney I'd hired, a sharp woman named Carol who had clearly seen everything in her 30-year career and found approximately none of it surprising, handled the process efficiently. Brenda's initial posture was combative. She had her own attorney, but once Carol indicated that we had documentation of the attempted unauthorized transfer, and that we were prepared to bring in the financial records going back 18 months, the temperature of the negotiation dropped pretty quickly. There was no claim to the inheritance. There couldn't be. I'd taken care of that. The house stayed with me. She had contributed nothing toward it financially and moved in after the marriage, making it legally clean. Brenda walked away with a small settlement, a few $1,000s that I agreed to largely because Carol said it was the fastest way to close the process and I was, by that point, very ready to be done. She also walked away with her car, her personal belongings and Kyle. Kyle, to his minimal credit, left without incident. He actually apologized to me on his way out. It was brief, mumbled, mostly directed at the floor, and followed immediately by a request to borrow $20 for gas, which I declined. But I appreciated the gesture. They moved into an apartment on the east side of town. I know this because I have one mutual acquaintance with Brenda who mentioned it once in passing and I did not ask follow-up questions because I genuinely do not need to know more. The inheritance, once fully settled and transferred, went into a secure investment account that I set up with Patricia's guidance. She spent about 3 hours on the phone with me walking through options and asking questions in a way that made me feel like an intelligent adult capable of making good decisions, which was a refreshing experience given the previous 18 months. She also gently mentioned, somewhere around the 2-hour mark, that she had a colleague in Denver who had recently gone through a divorce and was doing really well, and that she thought we might get along. I told her I needed approximately 11 years before I was ready to entertain that idea and she laughed and said that was fair. The house feels different now. Bigger, obviously, because it's just me again. But also quieter in a way that took me about 2 weeks to stop being unsettled by. I had forgotten what my own home felt like when it was mine. I cooked a meal the first week I was alone and ate it at the kitchen table with no television on, and it was the most peaceful 45 minutes I had experienced in almost 2 years. I also sat in my armchair for the first time in over a year without anyone being in it already. I made a dramatic production out of this, alone in my living room, by sitting down with great ceremony and saying out loud to no one in particular, "Welcome back." My dog, who I haven't mentioned until now because this story was complicated enough already, looked up at me from the floor with the expression of a creature who has witnessed a great deal and has no further comments. His name is Biscuit. He's a 6-year-old beagle. He was, throughout all of this, completely loyal and uncomplicated, which is more than I can say for most of the other parties involved in this story. Diane, Kyle's girlfriend, reached out one more time after everything settled. She wanted to let me know she had broken up with Kyle and was doing well. I thanked her sincerely because without her call and those 47 screenshots, the picture I had would have been incomplete. I would have known something was wrong but not exactly what shape it was. She told me Kyle had told her, after she confronted him, that the whole thing had been his mother's idea. That Brenda had spotted me at the cookout that day, had found out through Greg that I owned my own house and had a good job, and had decided from the very beginning that I was worth pursuing strategically. That the warmth, the 2 hours of easy conversation, the sundress, the Bengals game, all of it was curated. I sat with that for a long time. I'm not going to pretend it didn't hurt. It did. It hurt in the specific way that things hurt when you realize they were designed to hurt you. But here is what I also came to understand, sitting in my armchair with Biscuit on the floor beside me and the house quiet and mine again. That cookout was 5 years ago. And between then and now, I heard a phone call I wasn't supposed to hear. I kept a notebook. I talked to people I trusted. I moved slowly and carefully and I did not let my feelings make my decisions before my thinking was done. I protected my uncle's legacy. I protected 11 years of brown bag lunches. I sat down in that living room and I told the truth and I did not raise my voice until the very end and I forgave myself immediately for that part. I am 43 years old and I still drive a 2017 Camry with a cracked dashboard. But that crack does not bother me even slightly anymore, because I know exactly what's in my accounts and I know exactly who has access to them, and the answer to both of those questions makes me feel, on most mornings, like a genuinely wealthy man. Not because of the money. Although the money helps. Because of the knowing. Because of the clarity. Because of the particular quiet that settles over a house when everybody in it is exactly who they say they are. I fixed the crack in the dashboard last month, actually. It took 40 minutes and cost $12 at the auto parts store. I don't know why it took me so long. Some things you just let sit because you've gotten used to them and it doesn't occur to you that you could fix them until you suddenly have the time and energy to notice. The Bengals, for the record, are having a complicated season. but I still watch every game. Some loyalties you just keep. If you made it to the end of this story, I want you to know that means something to me. These are not easy things to talk about and they are not easy things to hear. But they are real. And real things deserve to be said. If this story helped even one person feel less alone in something they are going through right now, then it was worth every word. Subscribe if you haven't. Share this if someone you know needs to hear it. And leave a comment. Tell me what part of this hit you hardest. Tell me if you've been there. Tell me if you've made it through. Biscuit and I will be here. If you made it to the end of this story, you are exactly the kind of person this channel was built for. Real stories. Real emotions. Real people who understand that life doesn't always go the way you planned, but that doesn't mean you don't come out on top. Do me a favor right now. Drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from. I want to know where this story landed. Because let me tell you something, we have been getting love from all over and it genuinely blows my mind every single time. To our viewers in the United States, you are the heartbeat of this channel. The way you show up, share these stories, and leave your thoughts in the comments keeps this whole thing alive. We see you and we appreciate every single one of you. To everyone watching from the Philippines, your support has been absolutely overwhelming and honestly unexpected in the best possible way. You all comment with your whole chest and I love that about you. This channel would not be the same without you. To our Canadian viewers, quietly loyal, always showing up, never making a big deal about it. Very Canadian of you. We love it. And to anyone watching from New York specifically, in the city that never sleeps, you somehow still found time to sit down and listen to this whole story. That means more than you know. Wherever you are, hit that subscribe button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and I will see you in the next one.